Long Island native James Hagens is considered one of the top 5 picks in this year's NHL Draft. We'll explain why the Islanders should not trade back into the first round because of the long-term impact that it would have on the team. We'll have that and the latest trade rumors next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
You're Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey, and we have got a lot to cover as the draft is about 2 weeks away. We all know James Hagens is available as one of the top, let's say, 5 picks in this year's draft. Will the Islanders trade back into the first round to get him? We'll discuss that and why it's not necessarily a good idea. Plus, JG Pageau trade rumors heating up again. We'll break down the latest and the possibility of the Islanders signing another KHL free agent. All that and more on today's show. I got to start with James Hagens, the Long Island native, hop hog guy, and lifelong Islander fan. And I get it. It's a great story and a nice bonus if James Hagens becomes an Islander. It gives him a lifelong dream fulfilled. It gives the Islanders an additional talented player, assuming that they don't use the first overall pick on Hagens. And, you know, there's just something wonderful about having a top Long Island born and bred guy who wants to be here on the island, who knows the island, who's a part of the community, to come in and help this team return to respectability. All of those things are compelling stories. But at the same time, hockey is a business. And the goal in hockey is to win championships. And unfortunately, the way the stars are aligning, the cards are being dealt, it isn't straightforward that the New York Islanders will end up with James Hagens. And look, he's, like I said, one of the top 5 players in this draft. But at this time, no scouts that I've seen or spoken to rank James Hagens as the number 1 prospect. Most people have him somewhere between 3rd and 6th in the draft as far as top prospects are concerned. Yes, before this past season started, Hagens was considered by many scouts and experts to be the number 1 guy, but after this season, he is no longer there. You don't want to use the first overall pick in the draft for anything but the best available player. And if the Islanders honestly believe James Hagens is the best overall player, which I define as the player who will have the biggest long-term impact on the franchise, by all means, take James Hagens. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that's not what the Islanders believe. That almost every expert believes they are going with Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman, as the top overall pick. Michael Misa is largely considered the second best candidate in the draft. And, you know, it's probably Schaefer, could be Misa, unlikely to be Hagens. So there's 2 realistic ways you can add James Hagens. Number 1 is you trade back. You get rid of that first pick, move back to 3, 4, 5. Hope Hagens is still there. Obviously, the further back you go, the less certain you can be that he'll still be on the board? If you're picking third, 99% chance that Hagens is there. You move back to fourth, maybe it's 75%. You go back to fifth, 50% at best, and so on. But if you trade away that first round pick, you can add prospects, players, more picks, get Hagens, and build from there. I don't love that idea. I think the Islanders should use the first pick, take the most impactful player available in this draft, and move forward. But if you really want to get Hagens and you're not going to use the first overall pick on him, I would prefer that you trade back, get extra picks, prospects, and or players, and go from there. The other alternative, which I think it's one that more people have been discussing, but I think it's not the wisest way to go, is you take, let's say, either Schaefer or Misa with the first pick, and then trade up to get that third, fourth, fifth pick and grab Hagens. Here's why I don't like it. Number one, you're almost certainly trading away one of the two first-round picks you have in 2026 as part of this deal. And I think, realistically, since the 2026 draft is a deeper and better draft, I like the idea of having two picks in that draft. Now, Hagens may be better than one of those picks. Maybe the Avalanche, the pick they got from the Avalanche in the Brock Nelson trade, because the Avalanche are most likely, in the top 10 in this league again next year. So you're talking the 24th pick, the 28th pick, whatever it's going to be. You're not talking about, a low first round pick. You're talking about a late first round pick. I can handle that to an extent, but I just really like the idea of having multiple picks in a deep draft, especially since you can use those picks if you really have someone you really like, let's say in the top 5 or 6, you move up, you grab them. But to me, you don't want to go after a guy just because he's from Long Island. And I'm not saying James Hagens is not going to be a really good hockey player. I like him. I like what I've seen from him when I've watched highlights and what I've read from scouts. I really think it could be a great thing for him to be an Islander. But the question you need to ask if you're the New York Islanders, if you're Matthew Darsh, here's the question ultimately that you need to answer. If James Hagens was exactly the same player that he was, but he was from Hamilton, Ontario, instead of Hauppauge, Long Island, would you still make the same trade to get him? If the answer is yes, by all means, if it's a hockey trade, by all means, go get the kid. But if it is just a deal because it's a great story that he's from Long Island and maybe you could sell a few extra tickets initially, I don't think that's the right move. When you're talking about top 5 picks in the NHL draft, you want whatever move you make to be a hockey move. You want the best players available, and you don't want to give up too much to get those players, especially if you already have the number 1 overall pick. So I'm okay with it if they really think Hagens is the answer to one of their many needs. And I'll take it a step further. If you're able to unload some of these veterans on expiring or bad contracts, guys who you need to move on from to free up cap space. Let's say that the Utah Mammoth are willing to take JG Pageau or, some other veteran player, Scott Mayfield, someone who the Islanders may be looking to move on from anyway. And you don't have to overpay. Yeah, okay, I could see it, but it's got to be a hockey move. It's got to make sense as a trade, regardless of where the player is from. It's a nice story. I'd love to see a Long Island native thrive, and what a great story it would be. Long Island native helps lead Islanders to their first Stanley Cup since 1983. It would be beautiful to see. But you know what? Whoever leads the Islanders to their first cup since 1983, it doesn't matter where they're from. If it would have been John Tavares, if it would have been Rick DiPietro, if it's going to be a Cole Iserman or Matthew Schaefer or Michael Misa, the story is 99% as good. And in order to make that deal, to trade back into the first round to grab James Hagens, in my mind, it's got to be a hockey deal, not just he's from Long Island, let's get him kind of a deal. And let's see what Matthew Darsh ends up doing. I like the kid. I think he'd be a great Islander. I just don't think he's the first overall pick in this draft. And I would love to see him in an Islanders uniform, but only under the right circumstances. All right. We have got a lot more to discuss on today's show. More JG Pageau trade rumors. We'll discuss that and its possible impact on the Islanders. Another KHL free agent is available. We'll see about that. And for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a veteran forward who was briefly a New York Islander in 2008, 2009, but is better known for his time with the Ottawa Senators. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got all that and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. I still enjoy eating out, but not at the expense of my financial well-being. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you could use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. It seems like it happens every few months. Trade rumors concerning JG Pageau. And look, I think ultimately it makes sense for the New York Islanders to look to trade JG Pageau. I think that at this point, he's 32 years old, going on 33. He's got 1 year left on his contract. He is the kind of player that is useful especially to a good hockey team. The face-offs, the penalty kill, the ability when necessary to be on the second power play unit or to move up to the second line, although he really is a third line center more than anything else right now. He really didn't excel on the second line, but you look at that, you combine it with the ability to free up possibly $5 million in cap space, and you realize the Islanders have a lot of guys who can play center right now. Barzal, Horvat, Cizikas, Ritchie. If you bring back Kyle McLean, there are a lot of guys who can play center. That's 5 guys for 4 lines. And, again, doesn't include anyone you may add over time. The question that Matthew Darsh has to ask ultimately is this. When do you get the best return for JG Pageau? I don't think it makes sense to extend JG Pageau at this point in his career, and considering where the New York Islanders are right now with respect to this team, I just don't think that it makes any sense to extend him. This is the time, if you're retooling, to move on from expensive veterans whose play will likely start to decline, rather than keep extending them a la Lou Lamoriello. So the question that Matthew Darsh has to ask is, do you get more in return for JG Pageau if you trade him now during this offseason, like at or before the draft, or if you hold on to JG Pageau and wait until the trade deadline? Look, JG Pageau would be a great trade deadline addition for a team like Colorado or Dallas or Tampa Bay or Florida. Again, those are the teams this year that I think could have used JG Pageau. But a guy who can give you occasional scoring, kill penalties, help on the power play, win in the faceoff dot. I like JG Pageau as a player. I've always liked him since they acquired him. The point is, considering where the New York Islanders are right now, long term, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to hold on to JG Pageau. So you want to maximize the return. If you get a really good offer for Pageau now, a really good offer, take it. If not, be patient and understand that you can move on from JG Pageau at the trade deadline when he will be a very in-demand player. And look, according to different reports that I have seen, there are a lot of teams who have mentioned interest in JG Pageau. And that's a good thing. I've heard the Winnipeg Jets. I've heard the Boston Bruins, the Carolina Hurricanes. I would prefer not to have him in the division. But again, bowl me over with a really good package. Let these teams compete for JG Pageau services. And look, I know there are people who are saying, no. The Islanders want to make the playoffs this year. And if they do that, they really should hold on to JG Pageau. And to an extent, there is truth there, that if making the playoffs this year is your biggest goal, JG Pageau is the kind of player who could help you get there. But to me, it goes back to this. Under Lou Lamoriello, the Islanders were always thinking short term. And it was always, let's get into the playoffs and anything can happen. But the Islanders were always barely making the playoffs. You heard players, Mathew Barzal, complaining, hey, we don't want to barely make the playoffs again. We want, if that's what you want, if you don't want to be a wild card team or a team that makes the playoffs on the last game or two of the season, you need to get younger, faster, more physical, and more skilled. You need to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And I believe to get out of the muddy middle, which this team has been stuck in for at least 4 years now, most Islander fans, if you present them with a plan, and it means getting younger, and it means watching a Cole Eiserman and a Callum Ritchie and a Matthew Schaefer or Michael Misa, and then 2 first-round picks in a year. If it means having these younger players play and not make the playoffs this year and get a better draft pick and put together a young core, don't get rid of all your veterans. I'm not talking about a full rebuild where you tear it all down, but you move on from some of the older players and then you build up these younger guys. I think most fans would gladly sacrifice a year where, hey, we don't make the playoffs this year, But by the end of the year, some of these kids are starting to show signs of maturity, of improvement. We have reason to hope for the future. I think it makes more sense to do that than to put all your chips on the table, cling to 8th place in the conference, and hope to go on this miraculous playoff run. If the Islanders truly want long-term success, to be a playoff team and a contender for the Cup for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, you got to take that step back to take 2 or 3 steps forward. And if that means moving on from JG Pageau, either during the offseason or anytime up until the trade deadline, let these other teams bid against each other, maximize your return, and go from there. In fact, if you can get even, a high draft pick and a player who is similar in style to JG Pageau, but 5-7 years younger, I would make that deal. We have rumors, we have heard substantial rumors that Lou Lamoriello turned down a first-round pick for JG Pageau more than once in the last few years. I'm hoping we can get at least a first-round pick or a good prospect or some combination of picks and prospects for Pageau if and when the time and the deal is right. Until then, let JG Pageau continue to be an Islander. He's a darn good Islander, and we'll see how this all plays out. This is one of the many things that Matthew Darche has to address in his first year as New York Islanders GM. We have got more to get to on today's show. Rumors abound now concerning another KHL free agent. Could they add, just like they added Maxim Shabanov a year ago? We'll talk about the player and how he might fit with the Islanders. That plus our Islanders birthday of the day still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So the rumors continue. It's off season. It's rumors time. And there have been several rumors concerning another top KHL free agent. You'll remember last year the Islanders added Maxim Shabanov, and he did pretty well in his first year with the Islanders. The 10 goals and 35 or so points. Not a bad rookie season. Now the player, a younger player than Maxim Shabanov, but another Maxim Shabanov. And Shabanov is 24. He is a winger. He scored 23 goals and 65 points in 67 games last year in the KHL. And the question is whether or not he would be a good fit on the island. He clearly is skilled. And, here is a guy who has been productive, 25 goals a year ago, 23 goals this past season, 50 points in 64 games, then 67 points in 65 games. Here's a guy who has been a solid KHL offensive player. He's a left-handed shot, so he plays mostly left wing. But here's the deal. Here's the concern. Shabanov is 5'8", 156. And I'll repeat that. He's 5'8", and 156. And that's what he's listed at. That probably means he's 5'6" and a half and 150 pounds soaking wet. Okay, now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that players who are 5'8" or 5'6" or 5'7" cannot be productive in the NHL. We have seen Alex DeBrincat, for example, been very productive. But Islander fans remember Ruslan Ishkakov. And he came to North America, and Lou Lamoriello and the coaching staff never really gave him much of a chance. And then he went back to Russia and wasn't all that productive. Only 12 goals and 29 points in 60 games. So, again, Shabanov could definitely help the Islanders get more offense. And again, I'll reiterate this. It may not be much of a contribution offensively in his first year. Siplikov had more points, more goals in his last year in the KHL than Shabanov, but only 10 goals in his rookie year in the NHL. So it takes time to adjust to the narrower rink, the more physical style in the NHL, living in a different country where they speak a different language. All of these things are things that you need to adjust to if you are a Russian player coming to the NHL. Now, the good news is the Islanders have a lot of Russians on their roster, whether it's Ilya Sorokin, Semyon Varlamov, Alexander Romanov, assuming he stays, Maxim Siplikov. There are plenty of fellow countrymen for Shabanov to interact with who can help him make the adjustment to life in Long Island or wherever, and in the NHL. So that is definitely a plus. And the Islanders, again, could probably find a way to squeeze him in under the cap. That shouldn't be a major issue depending on how much money he's going to get. The Islanders are one of 6 teams that are reportedly in the mix for Shabanov, including the Penguins, the Flyers, the Mammoth, the Bruins, the Golden Knights, and then the Islanders. So we'll see if it happens, but hopefully, this is another way that the Islanders could add some young talent to this roster and maybe get a little more offense in the mix without having to make a blockbuster trade. And again, I'm not saying this kid is going to come in and give you 30 goals. He's more likely going to give you 10 to 15 goals and 35 to 40 points as a rookie. But where does he go from there? Maybe a much better, more productive season down the pike, but it will take time. We'll see, and we'll keep you up to date on what happens in the quest for Shabanov going forward. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day, and Sunday was the 52nd birthday of former Islanders winger Dean McAmmond, originally a first-round pick, 22nd overall of the Chicago Blackhawks back in 1991. The Grande Cache, Alberta native made his NHL debut with Chicago in 91-92, then played for Edmonton, Chicago again, Philadelphia, Calgary, Colorado, Calgary, St. Louis, Ottawa, and then joined the Islanders late in the 2008-2009 season, finished his career with 1 year in New Jersey, played in 996 NHL games, 4 games short of 1,000, 186 goals, 448 points, 490 penalty minutes, add 6 goals, 13 points in 46 playoff games, none of those as an Islander. One of his better games with the Isles, March 2nd, 2009, Islanders hosting the Avalanche at the Old Barn. Andrew Raycroft, the goalie for Colorado, Jan Denis, the goalie for the New York Islanders. And our Islanders' birthday of the day, Dean McAmmond, gets the scoring started late in the first period. John Sim and Jeff Tambellini, the fourth line striking, they get the assist. That made it 1-0 Islanders. Islanders go on to win the game by a score of 4-2. For Dean McAmmond, he had a goal. He was a +2. He had 2 penalty minutes in this game. And he had 3 shots on goal in 14 minutes and 50 seconds of ice time. Dean McAmmond, a defensive forward late in his career during his brief stint on the island, he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no offseason. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. You can find the Locked On NHL podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And don't forget, I do host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, please do. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, feel free to email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. If you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders throughout this busy and important offseason, and it's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you anytime. Everydayers, we are back tomorrow. We will have the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings. We'll update you on the latest draft news, trade rumors, and more. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.